What's going on, guys? It's Danny from Fantasy Stock Exchange here, bringing you the second installment of the quarterback start-sit series we do over here at the Fantasy Stock Exchange YouTube channel, where I, myself, will be going through every single matchup of this week's slate, talking about the 1 p.m., 4 p.m., Sunday night, and Monday night games, and referencing whether I would start a quarterback, meaning they are top 12 locked and loaded type of option for me this week, whether I would sit a quarterback, meaning I'm avoiding them altogether. They're a guy that I don't want to trust in my lineup, or if I would be willing to stream a quarterback, basically saying that although I don't have top 12 expectations, they could be in a potential smash spot to have a high ceiling for this week. So I'll be referencing my rankings a lot in this video, and there are one of three ways you can get access to them. So if you go onto our website, thefantasystockexchange.com, you can actually purchase them for the season for $20. You can go on to Underdog Fantasy, use code FSC to get access to them, as well as a $10 deposit bonus on your sign up. As well as, if you guys have already heard, we actually introduced our new Patreon. So you guys can see on the screen the two different tiers we have available. But basically, you can either be a lad or a tone setter. So make sure you go do that down below. More information in the description. But before we get in today's video, as always, we're going to hit the intro. All right, so the first game to talk about this week on the 1 p.m. slate, we got the Los Angeles Chargers going on the road to play the Kansas City Chiefs. And obviously, you guys know, you're starting both of these quarterbacks. You're starting Justin Herbert. You're starting Patrick Mahomes. They are locked and loaded top 6 options for me this week. And both are superstar quarterbacks and pass-happy offenses. This week's over-under, in terms of their implied over-under total between this game, is the third highest of the week at 54.5. And these are just quarterbacks, no matter the matchup, you're starting on a week-to-week basis. So don't overthink it. Start both these guys on to the next matchup, and that's going to be Cardinals going on the road to play the Jacksonville Jaguars. And we know from the Cardinals standpoint, you are starting Kyler Murray. You can actually see this on the screen tweeted out by Hayden Winks. But in healthy games, where his shoulder obviously wasn't limiting him since the start of 2020, Kyler Murray has scored 27.3, 33.1, 24.7, 23.1, 27.3, 28.9, 38.1, 37.9, 30.9, and 34.6 fantasy points in those contests. And then you could also add the fact that this past week, because this was tweeting going into the Vikings game, he added, a 33.1 fantasy point outing against those Minnesota Vikings. So he's simply quarterback one at this point. I mean, honestly, like what he does from a consistency basis, from a ceiling basis, like you could talk about Patrick Mahomes, you could talk about Lamar Jackson, you could talk about Dak Prescott. In my opinion, Kyler Murray, until he's proven otherwise, is fantasy football's quarterback one for 2021. So absolutely love Kyler Murray. You guys know that. He's going to put up points on his end. But let's look on the other end, and let's talk about Trevor Lawrence. And this is a guy on the tentative stream start type of range. He's currently at about my quarterback 18 on the week. And this has been a slow start for Lawrence to start the season. The Jaguars offense hasn't really looked good. Trevor Lawrence hasn't been able to connect down the field efficiently. I believe there's a stat out there that 37% of his deep targets have actually been completely off target. So, but I'm willing to start him here in case I don't have better options, because I do believe this game against the Cardinals presents a potential shootout for a highly potent Cardinals offense. We know that the Cardinals are going to be able to put up points, which in theory will be able to give the Jaguars more opportunities in terms of the pace of play, in terms of the potential point outage of the Cardinals to have opportunities on the field. And a guy of Trevor Lawrence's talent is going to find a way to click on it soon enough. And in this potential matchup where he's going to need to put up points to match up with Kyler Murray, I do think that he could have a very high ceiling in this game. Now, am I starting him with confidence? No, but worst case scenario, you want to stream him. You're playing DFS. You want to get a little bit contrarian. I like Trevor Lawrence in that type of instance. But off this game, let's go into the next game. That's going to be the Chicago Bears traveling on the road against the Cleveland Browns. And listen, Justin Fields is named the starter for this game. Justin Fields is going to be a must start until I see otherwise. I mean, I kind of broke it down when talking about the potential ceiling of Justin Fields in the top 5 breakouts video. If you haven't already seen that, make sure you go click that in the YouTube channel below. But basically, I broke down the math as to why exactly the Konami code rushing quarterbacks are so advantageous from a fantasy standpoint, and talked about it with Justin Fields in depth. I mean, this is a guy with adept athletic ability, but let's talk about the Konami code in 4-point passing touchdown leagues. You have a rush or a point for every 10 rushing yards and 6 points for every rushing touchdown. When in comparison, you only get a point for every 25 pass yards and 4 points for every passing touchdown. So in theory, rushing yards are 2.5 times more valuable than a passing yard, and a rushing touchdown is 1.5 times more valuable than a passing touchdown. So if you're getting a guy like Justin Fields, who could contribute that 60 to 80 rushing yard threshold, which we have seen throughout the preseason, we have seen in his collegiate career, I'm going to be able to start him. Again, the matchup isn't exactly the greatest from a pure passing standpoint, but I do believe, similar to what we've seen from Jalen Hurts these past 2 weeks, Justin Fields can get to quarterback one status simply through his legs. So until I see he incredibly struggles as a passer or the Chicago Bears offense isn't putting up points at all, I'm going to be able to start Justin Fields with confidence. So other side of the matchup, we're talking about Baker Mayfield, quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. And he's a weird instance because if you're talking about real life NFL quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield is one of the better quarterbacks in the league. I think he's a good top 12, top 14 type of quarterback in the NFL. The problem that I see here, although he has Odell Beckham back, we can kind of look at it as a net neutral, given that he is losing Jarvis Landry, is that in order for Baker Mayfield to pay off from a fantasy football standpoint, he has to be ultra efficient in passing to be able to return that value. Because this is a guy that's probably not going to have much more than 35 passing attempts in any single given game, but he also doesn't contribute a lot in the ground game. And going against the Chicago Bears defense is enough for me to rank him outside of my top 20 quarterbacks this week. So yes, I would start a Trevor Lawrence over a Baker Mayfield. I would start a Derek Carr over a Baker Mayfield. I just simply don't see a ton of upside in Baker Mayfield going up against the defense that absolutely neutralized Joe Burrow last week. So I'm staying away from Baker Mayfield in my lineups for this week against the Bears. Let's go into the next matchup, though, and that's going to be the Washington football team traveling on the road to play the Buffalo Bills. And from the Buffalo Bills standpoint, I get it. Listen, he struggled these first couple of weeks, but you are still starting Josh Allen. The production, the play has been a concern thus far, but 2 bad games isn't going to fully get me off of the 2020 MVP runner-up, which is what Josh Allen represented last year. This is still a highly potent, highly capable Bills offense, and I think this is going to be a get-right game for Josh Allen, because if it isn't, then I'll have legitimate concerns season long for Allen. But till then, I'm still rolling him out with top 8, top 9 type of confidence, although you were drafting him as probably quarterback 2, quarterback 3 off the board. I still think he's going to be in that mid-tier type of quarterback 1 range. And on the flip side, Taylor Heineke, listen, you're sitting Taylor Heineke. He had a decent game last week against the Giants in a goofy Thursday night football game, but against a really, really competitive Buffalo Bills defense that actually neutralized the Miami Dolphins last week, I'm just not trusting Taylor Heineke to be able to perform up to many standards, in my opinion, this week. He's probably a bottom 7 type, bottom 5 type of option this week in fantasy football. So steer clear of that. On to the next matchup, and we're going to go to a divisional matchup between the Colts and the Titans. And I believe this to be an option where you can stream Ryan Tannehill. Listen, I get it. The Colts defense is pretty tough comparatively to the rest of the field, but Ryan Tannehill hasn't really played well to start this year, but sooner rather than later, the talented trio of A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, and Ryan Tannehill will click, and it could happen in a game at home against the Colts in a divisional game. So I'm tempering my expectations. I still think he can meet that top 15 type of threshold. This isn't the Ryan Tannehill I went into the season with having a locked and loaded top 10 stance, but I do think that this could be a potential get right situation for Tannehill to end up reacclimating his status as a back end 1, high end 2 type of fantasy football quarterback, because he simply hasn't played like that to start the season. On the flip side, Jacob Eason, no. All right, next matchup. We're going on, all jokes aside, though, with Jacob Eason, you're just not going to be starting him. He's the backup to Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz sprained both of his ankles. I don't know. But Jacob Eason, yeah, he's got a big arm. He's terrible with his decision-making. He's got freaking bricks for feet. I just don't trust him to be able to create outer structure on his own here. And in a game where they're going to have to put up points, hypothetically, I just don't think that Eason is up to the challenge. So enough on Eason. I'm done talking about him. Let's move on to the next game. That's going to be the New Orleans Saints going on the road to play the New England Patriots. Battle of the News. And I'm sitting both these quarterbacks. Listen, this matchup is completely ugly. You have 2 stingy defenses against volatile quarterbacks that don't bring a rushing score. I'm sitting both of these quarterbacks. And although the over-under is only 42.5, I think this is a legitimate like 17-13, 16-10 type of game. I'm just staying away from both of these quarterbacks. And as we know with Jameis Winston, you got good Jameis, you got bad Jameis. I just don't simply see an instance where good Jameis can come out against Bill Belichick and that Pat's stingy defense. So on to the next matchup. We're going to be talking about the Atlanta Falcons traveling on the road to play the New York Giants. And from the Giants standpoint, I'm fine with streaming Daniel Jones. Listen, the Falcons defense has conceded 2 straight 30-plus point outings in the past 2 weeks. Tom Brady in week 2, Jalen Hurts in week 1. And while I don't see a 30-plus point ceiling, week winning type of ceiling from Daniel Jones this week, I really feel a productive game coming against a Falcons defense that simply can't stop a nosebleed. I mean, Daniel Jones is actually 3rd in the NFL right now in quarterback rushing yards, tallying 122 rushing yards in the past 2 games. And although he presents a super risky and volatile play this week, I think his upside is legitimately 20 to 25 points, which in result would end up making him a top 12 quarterback this week. So he's in that fringe 15, 16 area for me, and I would be fine streaming him if I have no better options. But on the flip side of the matchup, talking about Matt Ryan, I'm sitting Matt Ryan. I mean, he's shown nothing thus far that inspires me to be able to play Matt Ryan in my lineups. He just looks cooked. His arm doesn't look the same. We know he doesn't bring a floor from his rushing. And if you can get trade value for him, if you have Matt Ryan and someone's still willing to give you a decent piece because of his name value, ship him off, because I just see this scenario turning into what was Ben Roethlisberger type from last year, where the arm's cooked. He's still trying to force it. So I still think Calvin Ridley will be fine because Matt Ryan doesn't know he's cooked. But in terms of actually starting Matt Ryan, don't. So we'll go on to the next matchup of the slate, and that's going to be the Cincinnati Bengals traveling on the road to play the Pittsburgh Steelers. And from the Bengals standpoint, actually speaking of Ben Roethlisberger, but from the Bengals standpoint, you can stream Joe Burrow simply because the Steelers defense has been banged up from injuries right now. I'll show that on the screen, but talk about guys like TJ Watt, Carlos Davis, Devin Bush, Alex Highsmith, all being limited at some point this week. So we'll see who actually is able to line up on Sunday, but all those question marks, all those injuries gave me enough of confidence to play Burrow as a fringe top 18 type of option, despite the Steelers being stingy. And on the flip side, I'm sitting Ben Roethlisberger. He is banged up. He struggled these first 2 games. And honestly, the Bengals defense, for the most part, has been a little bit better than I even thought they were. I mean, genuinely speaking, they did a decent job in week 1 against Dalvin Cook. They did a decent job this past week. I just think simply the Bengals defense can be able to do at least a decent number on Ben Roethlisberger. And Ben Roethlisberger is not a quarterback that is going to get there on efficiency, is going to get there on his legs. He's going to get there on incredible volume. And if he's coming to this matchup banged up with a pec injury, I just don't see that volume being able to suffice this week. So I'm not touching Ben Roethlisberger anywhere near my top 20 this week. But next matchup, we got the Ravens at the Lions, and you guys know you're starting Lamar Jackson. If you sit Lamar Jackson, you don't deserve to play fantasy football, but he's an auto must start anytime he suits up to play on Sundays. And against a struggling Lions defense, he is my quarterback 2 this week, only behind Kyler Murray, and I'm expecting a 30-plus point game. So enough of Lamar Jackson. He is a superstar. Let's go on to Jared Goff, and he's simply way too volatile a start week to week for me to really have confidence playing him against the Ravens this week. So, I mean, if you're in a super flex and you have no better quarterback too, I guess, but in 1 quarterback leagues, you have way better options than Jared Goff this week. But traveling on to the 4 p.m. slate, we're going to go with the New York Jets on the road against the Denver Broncos. And I am confident with streaming Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Bridgewater has been on fire to start this season. And you guys can see a couple tweets on the screen, but Greg Rosenthal actually tweeted this out. No one in the NFL, no other player, we're not talking about Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, nobody in the NFL this year has more throws for over 20 yards than Teddy Bridgewater to start the season. And just kind of outlining what he's done in these past 2 weeks, 28 for 36, 264 yards, and 2 touchdowns in week 1, as well as week 2, putting up 26 for 34, 328 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's been ultra efficient. He's been able to put up the yards, and I genuinely think this will continue against a struggling Jets defense this week. So fire Teddy Bridgewater with fringe top 15 type of expectations as a streamer. But on the flip side, talking about Zach Wilson, I mentioned volatile with Jared Goff. Zach Wilson is far, far, far too volatile to start after a turnover heavy first two games. Listen, I love Zach Wilson. I still think he has the talent, the opportunity to be able to succeed throughout the rest of the season. But given his struggles these first two games, and given the fact that the Broncos are one of the stingiest defensive units in the entire league, you should have way better options than Zach Wilson this week, especially in one quarterback league. So steer clear. Don't start Zach Wilson this week as much as I love him. Let's head on to the next matchup, and that's going to be the Miami Dolphins going on the road to play the Las Vegas Raiders. And you are being able to stream Derek Carr. I mean, this is a guy that's played way, way too well to not at least earn stream status after eclipsing over 20 fantasy points in each of his last two games. Although it's a tougher matchup against a stingier type of defense with the Miami Dolphins, I'd roll Carr with fringe top 15 type of expectations. He's performed well enough. The Raiders offense has performed well enough for me to be able to have that type of confidence in Carr. And if he has a bad matchup or if he has a bad game, I can adjust afterwards. But Derek Carr's playing simply too well right now to sit him if you don't have any top 8 to 10 type of options on your fantasy football rosters. But on the flip side of the matchup, obviously we know the recent news. Tua Tagovailoa is ruled out for this game. You're sitting Jacoby Brissett and a backup quarterback going up against this Raiders pass rush, talking about Yannick Ngakoue, talking about Max Crosby. That's been so stingy to start the season. Don't touch Jacoby Brissett in your lineup. So we can head on to the next game and talk about a boring, rugged type of game with the Dolphins Raiders. Let's go on to the highest pace, highest expected output scoring game of the slate. That's going to be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers traveling on the road to play the Los Angeles Rams. And you are starting both of these pocket passers, arguably the game of the week and the one with the highest over under at 56 right now. Both of these quarterbacks have legitimate 300, 350 passing yards, 3+ patching touchdown upside. This is a similar game script to what we saw in week 1 with the Buccaneers playing the Cowboys, with both quarterbacks being able to have truly remarkable ceilings in this game. And I expect this to be a 44-41, 38-35 type of game. And in that instance, with that amount of points, you're starting both the quarterbacks, Tom Brady and Matthew Stafford. So hopefully you have one of them because this is going to be a fun game to watch. But on to the next one, and that's going to be the Seattle Seahawks traveling on the road to play the Minnesota Vikings. And you are starting both Russell Wilson and Kirk Cousins. Russell Wilson being with top 5 type of expectations, Kirk Cousins with fringe top 10 expectations. And I mentioned this exact game script last week when the Cardinals played the Vikings, but Kirk Cousins is going to absolutely explode in this matchup. I mean, we're talking about a game with a high over-under, with a high expected points to be scored. This is the type of game that Kirk Cousins thrives in, that puts up fantasy points in. And listen, Russell Wilson on the other end is going to be able to put up a fringe top 3, top 4 type of day. I think he's going to have a 30-point outing from a fantasy football standpoint. And this is one of my favorite contrarian game stacks of the week. I mean, everybody's going to talk about the Bucs Rams. Everybody's going to talk about the Cardinals Jags. But I genuinely think the Seahawks Viking game is my main target because I genuinely think, talking about the arsenals of DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Justin Jefferson, KJ Osborne, Adam Thielen, I think there's going to be points scored in bunches in this game, and it's going to make for must-watch TV. So can't wait. Starting both these quarterbacks, and you should have very high expectations for each of them. But traveling now, we're going to Sunday Night Football. And we're going to be talking about the Green Bay Packers traveling on the road to play the San Francisco 49ers, and you are starting Aaron Rodgers. I get it. Aaron Rodgers, maybe first game, you're very disappointed with him. He really picked it up in game 2 going up against the Detroit Lions, and I think he continues that type of pace this week against the 49ers. When Aaron Rodgers is on his game, few in the league can match his pure passing upside. Talk about the weapon score, Devontae Adams. Talk about the skill himself. And although the 49ers are a tough matchup, there are really few matchups in the entire league where you would relegate Rodgers to a sit status simply because he's too damn good at football to sit. So you're starting Aaron Rodgers. You simply probably won't have, if you have Aaron Rodgers, one of the top 7 starts of the week. So roll out Aaron Rodgers with confidence. Sunday Night Football, this is his spot to step up. So I absolutely love Rodgers. On the flip side, talking about Jimmy G, you're sitting him against the Packers. I know the Packers are a struggling defense in real life right now, but Jimmy Garoppolo simply inspires no confidence at all. I mean, this guy is unwilling to throw the ball down the field because he knows if one error he makes is going to cost him his job. He doesn't want to make that mistake. So he's going to throw these little slant balls. He's going to feed Deebo Samuel underneath. And it just makes for boring football from his standpoint. It makes for boring football from a fantasy standpoint. And because he doesn't add anything with his legs, you're getting a low ceiling passer along with a low ceiling rusher if you were able to start Jimmy Garoppolo. So I'm staying clear of him. Don't start him. But now, finally, let's talk about the Monday Night Football game. We're going to be going to the Philadelphia Eagles, traveling on the road to play my beloved Dallas Cowboys, and you're starting both of these quarterbacks with confidence. Both these guys are absolute must starts given their starts to their seasons. For Dak, he's going up against a defense that was that he basically has carved up throughout his career. This is a guy who actually has an 18-5 record in the NFC East. A little stat I wanted to provide there. And given his passing upside on a week-to-week basis, he is a top fantasy football option. Listen, I know the narrative is going to be, oh, he struggled against the Chargers, yada, yada, yada. There were 15 total possessions in that game. Yes, you heard that correctly. 15 total possessions between the Chargers and the Cowboys. That is why it hit the under. When this Cowboys offense is getting more opportunities to have possessions in a game-to-game basis, Dak Prescott has legitimate any game 300, 350, 400 passing yard upside, along with 3+ passing touchdowns. You simply don't sit that level of ceiling in. On the flip side with Jalen Hurts, I mentioned the passing upside of a Dak Prescott. The Hurts rushing floor is real. I mentioned Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson are the most athletic quarterbacks in the league. Right now, unless you want to count Justin Fields, Jalen Hurts is right on the cusp of those guys. He has boosted these past 2 games to a 25-point per game start in these first 2. And although he's a limited passer, in my opinion, his rushing upside to simply be able to suffice a very good fantasy football outing. So I have him ranked as my quarterback 9 on the week. I know I'm a big Cowboys fan. I think that the Cowboys are going to limit him from a passing standpoint. It's just with Jalen Hurts. If Michael Parsons is playing edge, is Jalen Smith going to be tracking him down? Is Leighton Vander Esch going to be spying him? I just don't see a scenario where Jalen Hurts has less than 55, 60 rushing yards. And if that's the case, he's going to be able to produce a very good fantasy football output day. So overall, I wrapped up my start sits. If you guys enjoyed this video and you're interested in more, watching more, leave a like down below. It helps us a lot in that YouTube algorithm. And as always, if you are new to the channel, you enjoyed so far, hit that subscribe button. We're currently on the road to 10,000 subscribers, just eclipsed 6.5K, I believe, this past week. So appreciate you guys a ton. We will see you Sunday for Sunday live stream. Peace out, y'all.